And it's good to see so many people here, especially as I'm no longer accustomed to standing in front of a large number of people and thinking to myself, I know these people, but that's how it is today. Jamie Kirkpatrick. I can't recall when I met Jamie Kirkpatrick for the first time, but I vividly recall my first sustained encounter with that extraordinary laugh. Early 1970s, I was a PhD student in what was then political science, and every Friday evening a cohort of revellers would sardine themselves into the bar of the Shipwright's Arms in Battery Point. Jamie, not long since arrived to take up a position in geography, was one of us. He was a fellow beer swiller at the time, so you can see just how long ago this was. And he was as thin as a pencil. Over the years, over the decades, his appearance remained remarkably stable, except that the extreme thinness eventually gave way to what we might call a much more substantial physique. From the shoulders up, though, that striking head remained largely unchanged. But the laugh, that famous laugh, would roar across the general pub camaraderie, and I remember how I would marvel at it. When this man laughs in the Shipwright's Arms, I thought to myself, startled people going about their business in Launceston must look over their shoulders to see where the laughter is coming from. Since Jamie died, there has been much reference to the famous laugh. But to the best of my knowledge, no one has yet commented upon the remarkable fit between the laugh and the man. Jamie lived life with gusto. He had such joie de vivre. His extraordinary laugh encapsulated that gusto, that joie de vivre. In a sense, it was a window into the very essence of the man himself. Warm, large-hearted, and full of the uncontained joy of life. When we became colleagues, Jamie and I often engaged in inconsequential yarning. In those early days, Jamie was an anarchist by temperament and also by commitment, though this always seemed to me to sit uneasily with some of his government-projected policy positions. And as the years rolled by, I noted that it did figure less frequently in his discourse. I eventually left the university and embraced a freedom that would have suited an anarchic disposition. That was not possible within the institutional constraints of university life. I always meant to ask Jamie whether he'd moved on from the glorious youthful promise of anarchism, but the years rolled by. I no longer saw Jamie in the corridor on a daily basis, and I never did. Indeed, I moved emphatically away from the academy, but Jamie stayed with it because he loved his chosen profession and he loved his students. Until it all turned sour for me, so did I. As we approached the age when most academics move towards retirement, Jamie and I agreed that we loved the job so much that we would stay on, and we shook hands on it. Jamie stayed true to the fact, but I betrayed it. Not that I lose any sleep over this act of betrayal. I've never regretted my decision to shut the office door and walk away. When I knew him best, Jamie didn't sleep much. While we mere mortals were off in the land of Nod, Jamie was at work on that formidable body of academic writing that stands in his name. Or he was reading. Jamie was a voracious reader, and his tastes were eclectic. He was a true polymath. He devoured writings learned and creative. Now, I thought that I was a fanatical and robust reader, so much so that I keep an annual record of every book that I get around to reading from cover to cover. And to my great surprise, I discovered that Jamie did this too. Towards the end of each year then, we'd sit in the staff room and tally the scores. And every year, Jamie won the big literary pissing competition, hands down. He read far more books than I did, and he read books across a great range of genres. We were accustomed to thinking of Jamie as fixed on his science, but in fact, he was the ultimate intellectual all-rounder. A man, for example, who could comfortably inject the great 19th century polymath William Morris into a work of scientific observation, as he did in his recent book launches. Here's what he wrote in his preface to Ecology Underfoot, that marvellous book that we launched with such fanfare a few days before he died. In the preface, Jamie wrote, "Herein I present close-up, Morris-esque images of the rest of nature, with scientific descriptions and scientific speculations. One polymath acknowledging another, one truly great polymath acknowledging another." I've so far offered personal and idiosyncratic observation. I would not wish these to obscure Jamie's extraordinary professional achievements. I believed him to be the finest academic in the university, and it dismayed me to realise that the university did not always seem to agree with this. The university was fixated on something called global relevance. But Jamie applied his scholarship to Tasmania, and that was what he wrote about. I've always held that the primary collective task for the University of Tasmania is to understand its host place, this island, Tasmania. And no one understood Tasmania, the intricate living processes that constitute the island. No one understood the island better than Jamie. I was asked to introduce Jamie at some semi-learned gathering. I think it was the Mountain Festival. Mm-hmm. Chris Cooper will correct me if I'm wrong about this. And I made the observation when I was introducing him that Jamie was the most important living Tasmanian. because he carried within him a breadth and depth of island knowledge and insight that was entirely unique to the great man himself. I built this observation into a poem, and if you think you can stand it, I might read it shortly. What I also remember saying, but is not in the poem, was that Jamie was so important to Tasmania that were he to fall under a bus, that would be a far greater tragedy than would be the entire Tasmanian cabinet falling under a bus. And now Jamie has fallen under a bus, or at least the equivalent thereof. And we are bereft. And we are right to be bereft. No one, the saying goes, is indispensable, but that's simply not true. Jamie is indispensable. He has gone into the great darkness, and with him has gone all that unwritten knowledge and understanding of which we stand in sore need. We are right to be bereft. Knowing the mountain moorland, wind, cold as a rasp, it is enough to breathe. I make a stumbling progress, but the man of science is sure at home. He strides for the 1947 fire line, tracking a floral succession. Cushion plant recovers well. It grows in 40 years, about 40 by 40. His science rolls through the moorland. The clues decoded are tricked out for the poet. Pineapple grass, kerosene bush comes strong after fire. Aromatic, yes, but see how old it is now, how brittle. There is a solitary snow daisy, exquisite and endemic cradle of apricot. The scientist becomes poet. There is poetry indeed, its impetuous passion at the quick of his science. Snow skink is here, and the froglet. Marvellous anaspides, the great survivor, nails remote time to the mountain. Stringbogs key the plateau. The bogs are in decline, I think. The weight of water builds, the dam goes, the peat dries, and we don't help. Fire doesn't help. The peat comes back a centimetre a century. Such a long referation. I'm thinking of a public meeting. I'm to introduce the science. Just to put up with this, you're going to get the same story twice here. He knows more, I say, of this island, its ticking pulse, than any living soul. He is, I thinkify him now, our rarest human asset. Mosses colonise first, they hold the ground. On bare earth, little needles of ice push up. They eject the new young plants. Little needles of knowing push up to probe the opacity of policy. Science is a story among stories, oh yes, but it is a tale with weight. Below the mountain, The scurriers after policy are busy and urgent settling fates. They nurture their unknowing with care against the consequence. The scientist pushes his needles at bare, opaque ground. He works on. I'm done.